Getting Jamie Bamber was an interesting process. I mean, I wanted him as far as his acting ability, but also he's got a particular look that suited the role. Because another interesting lesson that I learned out of this is if, Jack Nicholson had to come up to me and said, I want to play this role, first and foremost, I would have fallen over and gone, wow, that's pretty cool. But then I would have had to have said, no, I'm sorry, you're not right for the role. Because it's such a precarious line that we're dancing the whole way through the role, I needed somebody that was going to be appealing, for lack of a better word, to both men and women. Yeah. So I didn't want this, hulk of a man with no neck that women probably would have gone, oh, well, he looks like a big thug, versus, some weedy little guy that men would have gone, well, how on earth could he possibly have, killed 33 people? So
average height, fit.
Yeah, Jamie just kind of suited that everyman guy next door. So I went after him because, as I said, Michael Reimer, who did Battlestar Galactica, how I met Reimer was through a friend of mine who's a photographer who'd worked with him, and so it was kind of a whole process of everybody who knew everybody. It wasn't the standard way of going. Same with Lockie as well, is that I knew him through mutual actors. And so it was, pretty easy in that sense that it was, just going through the standard process of, hey, would you be interested? Other than that, you would normally go through a casting agent, and then they've got to go to their agents, and then there's all these gatekeepers before you even get to them. So, we were pretty lucky in that sense. I think the biggest challenges in making the film came in post-production. At first we were worried about actually making the film for the money, because we had 66 locations and I think 96 speaking roles, and that's huge. That's a lot of location moving and so forth, and people don't realise how that can really gobble up, your budget. So again, as I said, because we had David Lightfoot, he's a genius at making everything work on a shoestring. So he was able to, balance it and just make it work for the money that we had. But that would have been the biggest thing, I think. The movie cost $3 million, and we had a lucky star. We were touched by the hand of God, as to put it any other way. One guy read the script and said, this is a good thing, I want to be part of it, which never happens. Never happens. So
What, a major private investor
Yep.
in Australia?
Yep, one guy.
Yeah.
Just doesn't happen. Even on my last film at 1.1 million, we had 11 investors, to make that, and 12 investors. And on this, it was just kind of meant to be, it just, everything fell into place, and it was a friend of a friend of a friend sort of thing. And, he's fortunate enough to be in that financial position that said, yeah, let's give this thing a go. I'm willing to take a risk, see what happens. People couldn't believe that we actually had every cent in the bank before the film even started. A lot of films slowly they even start without all their money in the bank, because it's coming in from different avenues and sources. We had everything, so we could walk up and say, okay, well, here's the money, what deal can you do us? And that was probably another reason why we were able to pull it together so well for such a small amount of money. Look, I think any director wants more money. There's so many things that we could have done differently with more money. But saying that, I also think that people get lazy with money. So the brilliant thing with this is that, to me, diversity creates creativity, and so you've got to start thinking out of the box and saying, well, how do we make it? And, the big thing, as I said, was that I didn't want to show any on-screen violence except for one scene. So in that sense, primarily I did that because I wanted it to be more visceral. I wanted the audience's mind to fill in the gaps and not be desensitised by, typical gratuitous violence that we see everywhere every day. But also it meant that we didn't have to be building prosthetic heads and this, that and everything else. So it worked in the film's favour anyway. Because of the construct of the material, it felt like it was always going to be an R-rated movie, and ironically in Australia we got MA, and to this day we're all still baffled as to how it got through as an MA because it's so confronting. But it's an MA here, it's an R in America, and I think it's an R everywhere else, but somehow But the thing is with this, like Romper Stomper, is if that you're going to commit to that sort of a film, then you can't all of a sudden sanitize it and turn it into a PG-13, which is prime example, Alien versus Predator or whatever it was. They took two R-rated franchises and tried to make it a PG-13 and it flopped.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science. So, same thing here, is we had to just stick to, the truth of what was on the page. I think when you're making a film, everybody's going after theatrical release. That's what you all hope for. But the reality is that when I did my first film in 2000, we submitted it to Sundance and there was about 400 entries that year. We submitted John Doe to Sundance for 2014 and there was 12,418 films this year. We live in a totally different time, so getting theatrical these days is really, really difficult, and we've been fortunate enough that we had a theatrical release in America in March. 20 screens, which isn't huge by any means, but for an Australian film, a small independent Australian film, that's a massive achievement anyway. And then for Australia, we did a 6-screen release around each of the capital cities for a week, and then straight to video on demand and then DVD the week after. So yeah, times have changed. Theatrical these days is a huge ask because there's so much information coming from so many different directions. The only way movies actually make any money at the box office these days is through huge print and advertising. And as an example, one of the hottest producers in Hollywood is Jason Blum, and he does Insidious and Paranormal Activity and all those movies, which they are able to make for $2 or $3 million. However, they're spending $30 to $40 million on print and advertising, and that's how it's getting people in the door. So, unless you've got that juggernaut behind you of one of the studios, you're pretty much pushing it up a hill. Print and advertising becomes your budget. So it doesn't matter whether it's us or music or any other creative medium. If a distributor is putting money into print and advertising, that all of a sudden becomes a debt that you owe them. Yeah. So, it can be fantastic, but it can also be a huge detriment as well. Yeah. And that's where you have to make a decision as to whether or not it's worth going theatrically. Our producers on John Doe, James Vernon and Christy Vernon, also did a movie a few years back called Gabriel. And they had the option of going to theatre in America and they chose not to. And by not going, it's built a cult following over there, which has meant that it's made a bucket load of money for them, but it means they've never had to recruit that print and advertising from the front end. So, there's pros and cons for both, and you've just got to weigh up your options and see what's going to be the best way forward. Look, I think the best part of making John Doe is actually the whole process. I don't think there's a singular part that stands out. I think when I look back and, somebody says, here's the money in the bank, and you actually get a readout of knowing that there's that amount of money sitting in a bank account ready to go, that's pretty amazing, because all of a sudden you go, right, for the next 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, however long it's going to take, I can focus on that and give it my full attention. So that's a cool moment, obviously. But then getting Jamie is a great moment. Just the whole process. I don't think there's anything that stands out, I love post-production, so I love sound and the sound design. And when you're working with so many unbelievably creative people, seeing what they bring to the plate is an amazing experience. We were so unbelievably fortunate to work with David Hirschfelder, who's an Academy Award nominee, BAFTA Award winner. He's one of the best composers in the world. And we'd go over to his place after he'd write something. He'd say, have a look at this. And all of a sudden that scene, you just sit there and be in amazement. A friend of mine said to me the other day, you've got to watch, there's this thing on YouTube called Star Wars minus Williams. And it's the final scene of the very first Star Wars film, where it's got all the fanfare and all that going on that they've won. And somebody's taken the music out and just put Foley in. And it's so bad to watch because there's nothing there, but with this music, all of a sudden it becomes this epic, iconic moment in film. And ironically, talking about that, my favourite scene in John Doe is based on Hirschfelder's music. And it's a bit when John gives himself up and realises the futility of everything. Why the fuck he's done it, the whole lot, and it all kind of just collapses around him, and it's so heartbreaking, yet so scary, yet it's everything.
Relief.
All of it. It's all of these flood of emotions, you know, the cops getting him and the media and everything. And all of that is all just beautifully nestled within this amazing music. Now, if you take that music out, the scene's okay, but that music, all of a sudden, it just goes bam. So, you know, there's that. There's actually going to the studio with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra and watching them perform it, and you're sitting there going, wow, this is crazy. So yeah, I can't say there's one bit that you go, oh, that's good. I mean, the whole thing. How many people get to do that sort of thing in their lifetime? You know, how many people dream of doing what I've done? So I don't really take any of it for granted. I sit there and go, wow, pinch myself moment again and again and again and again, while obviously staying focused. That's the hardest thing, is making sure that you're getting the best job possible. What determines the success of a film is quite a few factors. If you're going theatrical, then first and foremost, print and advertising. 20 years ago, if you wanted something to stick in somebody's subconscious, they needed to see it 6 times. Now, 24. That's fact. That's research that they've done it. And again, it's because we're bombarded with so much. So if you want to get out there and get to the point where somebody is actually going to get out of the comfort of their own house, go to the effort of walking into their car, driving into the cinema, spending more money than any other entertainment medium just about. I mean, Australia's the most expensive place in the world to go and see a movie. Then that's print and advertising. That's just getting it out everywhere. For us, because we didn't have that, torrents has been our biggest friend. As soon as it hit the torrents, our IMDb rating jumped up to like 1,600. Now, for a crappy little Australian film, that's huge, 1,600 to get to that level, and it was all because of the torrents. And not only the torrents, but the ripple effect of that is that, you know, the ratings were through the roof. We were getting 8, 9, 10s out of 10, 8, 9, 10 out of 10. We'd occasionally get the 1 out of 10. You'll either love it or hate it, you know, and it depends on the mood. It depends on the sensibilities that you have, or the morals that you have, or the ideals that you have before you walk into that cinema. Rotten Tomatoes, as an example, have only put up the bad reviews. You know, we got hammered by...
Some of the professional film critics, I know.
Yeah, I can't remember who it was. It was somebody in Hollywood. It might have been the Hollywood Reporter or somebody like that. You know, we got hammered by them, but then the independent ones were giving, you know, again, 8, 9s and 10s out of 10. And it's interesting, you know, after the fact, we were looking at it going, I wonder why we got hammered. Not saying that it deserves the 8, 9s and 10s out of 10. I mean, if I was to give the thing a rating, I'd probably give it an 8. Yeah. Not the best film in the world by any means, but the thing I'm most proud of is the fact that it can get that emotional response out of people, and not many films can do that. Not many people can provoke them to actually feel what the film does. You know, if you've got people like the Hollywood Reporter and Variety in that advocating this film, and if somebody actually went and stuck a mask on and went out and shot someone, you know, in the name of John Doe, that's where this film is quite scary. And I can understand that and see that. You know, it just takes somebody that's not quite all there to not realise the true essence of what it is and just see it at surface value as, oh yeah, put on a mask and go and kill somebody, you know. How many people have been wronged in this world? Millions, you know. Maybe somebody is so broken because of their experiences that they're like, yeah, you know what, I'm going to stick a mask on and I'm going to go and kill somebody in the name of John Doe. So, you know, you can kind of understand that. And it's very interesting as well, the other reactions that we've had, because we did test screenings here and in America, is the test screenings all rated really, really well with certain demographics. And the demographic that it really appeals to is to middle to lower class. And the upper class do not like it at all. And we were thinking about that as well, trying to analyse it, thinking, I wonder why that is. And you know, when you...
Is that just in the US or in Australia too?
Both. Yeah, across the board. Yeah. Across the board. And, you know, we were thinking, wonder why that's the case. What is it that the upper class don't like about it? And then if you think about it, again, logically, if you or I were in some situation, our best case scenario is to hire a lawyer, but more often than not, middle to lower class are going to go and get legal aid. If somebody wealthy is in a situation, they go and hire the best of the best of the best, who knows every loophole in the law. So essentially, you know, if we're looking at it that way, and this is very much generalising, but we're thinking, you know, why would it not be this? But they believe the system works because they're not affected by it because they're sitting in the ivory tower. Whereas there's so many people that you read every day, as I said in the newspapers on the news, that are feeling like, hang on, the system doesn't work. Now, if I was one of the family members of the guy that killed Jill Maher, who had 26 prior convictions, so if we're supposed to be evolved creatures and somebody does something once, well, we give them the benefit of the doubt and say, you're truly remorseful, okay, as heinous as what you've done is, let's move forward. But then if you're the victim's family of number 3, 4, 5, 6, up to 26, well, how on earth is that the system's working? How on earth is that's okay? And so that was, obviously a lot of the reason that we wanted to bring this out and talk about it at a public level, but I digress. The biggest lesson that I learnt from John Doe is that I'm not a fan of the system. I don't really like it at all. I don't like being beholden to another person's whim. And what I mean by that is that Steven Soderbergh, who's one of the most famous directors in the world, said that even at his level, it's like the first time every time when he goes to make a movie. And you've got these non-creatives that actually have the power because of the money to control your destiny. So in future, I don't want to do that. If I continue down this path, then it will be on a more personal level to make the movies that I want to make, that I want to watch, that I can control. And if that means that I don't do theatrical, that's fine. If I just distribute through the internet and there's an audience base that likes what I do, that's fine. I think the Screen Australia, Film Victoria and all the other guys are fantastic. We need to have them because if we don't really have an industry. Unfortunately, the way the Hollywood system works is the studios have got a pool of money and they go and invest in 30 films per year knowing that 1 or 2 of them are going to be their tent-pole movies and the rest of them are a risk, but we know that this is going to keep us buffed and we'll make money from there. We don't have that system set up in Australia. We don't have those resources, so we definitely need to have all of those government bodies in place. As far as the same people getting the same jobs over and over again, I think again it probably comes down to track record and it comes down to path of least resistance. They still are accountable. So if somebody comes up and they've got an idea to do some crazy, wacky new movie, and they haven't got a track record, then they're probably going to go with the dude that's just going to do the stock standard, by the numbers and go through there. So I can understand, their position. Years ago, I used to say, it's all crap and they only invest in the same people and over again. That was 30 years ago. It was the same sort of arguments that they're having now. I think the thing that needs to change is just looking at the content more would probably be more so than anything else, is that, I don't think Australians, we know for a fact that Australians don't like Australian movies because essentially they're the same subject matter over and over again. We don't want to go and watch depressing druggies or bloody kangaroos jumping across the outback or quirky romantic comedies. The problem with the Australian film industry is when I was young, it was inspiring. We had Mad Max and we had Blood Oath and we had Gallipoli and Man from Snowy River and all these diverse genres. And a lot of them have ended up being quite iconic movies. Now, after things like Strictly Ballroom and Priscilla, Queen of the Desert and Muriel's Wedding, since those three, I think, and because they were so successful in America, I think it just feels like they keep copying that same kind of film again and again and again. And it's like, guys, it doesn't work. Even Red Dog, that was just an anomaly. But then the distributors come out and say, oh, we can't understand why it won't sell overseas. Well, I wonder why. The other thing too that we face, unfortunately, is that as soon as people hear an Australian accent, particularly the way the accents are portrayed in the movies where they ham it up, everybody cringes. It doesn't seem professional, it seems Backyard Barry, which again is unfair because you get brilliant films like Snowtown and Animal Kingdom. Snowtown was a hard one to watch because it was based on a true events and it didn't make a huge amount of money, but Animal Kingdom I mean, that was, a brilliant film. It did what needed to do. It crossed all the T's and dotted the I's, and it did it really well and really professionally. But then, poor director David Michaud's now gone off and done The Rover, and that's tanked. And he tried to do something outside the box. So, look, I don't know, man. I don't know really what the future is. Even if the content does change. I mean, I've got a friend of mine, Justin Dix, who did a film called Crawl Space, and it looks like a huge budget American, Ridley Scott film, but it hasn't done anything anywhere. It's gone to DVD and it's sold, as just about any movie does, but it hasn't really done anything. And you're like, well, it looks like the business. But then, you get the opposite side of the coin where, even the Americans are saying, well, you're an Australian film, why are you trying to be an American film? So we're really in a precarious situation of how to move forward. I don't know. I mean, I honestly thought that we had something different with John Doe that might be able to cross a few boundaries because, of the subject matter. And the other thing too is that I tried to make sure that our accents were as, generally Australian people talk. Not the "g'day mate, how you going" sort of thing. Because even when I'm in the States, people say, "Oh, you don't sound Australian." And I'm like, well, what do I sound like? "Oh, well, you sound like Hugh Jackman." And I'd be like, well, he's Australian, and that's what a lot of Australians sound like, particularly in urban Australia. But their perception of how Australians sound is really, "Oh, yeah, no worries, mate, how you going?" And that's, I think we need to get away from that and just talk as most people do, But again, there's no answers, man. The future now is we've got a new project called Bound, which we're working on at the moment. We're in early stages of it. It'll probably be up and running around March to May next year, depending on a few factors. It's a lot smaller production than John Doe because of the experiences that I had with John Doe. I want to go back to something more intimate and more almost back to my roots and back to the people that I really love working with on a smaller scale. I loved working with everybody on John Doe, but the reality is there's people in there that we can't afford. I mean, I'd love to work with Hirschfelder on everything I do for the rest of my living days, but, to get that and to get an orchestra and that, they're just practicalities that you can't avoid. So, there's $500,000 just to do that alone. So, unfortunately, because of the practicalities of that, and again, seeing what the current technology offers you, I just want to go back to something that I can control myself from A to Z and just see what it turns out like. And just have a bit of fun this time. To survive in this industry is one word, simple. And that word is tenacity. It's not talent. Talent will only get you so far. Tenacity, you've just got to keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going. You look at somebody like Madonna, not the best singer in the world by any means. She's been around for 3 decades because she's tenacious and she kept going and she knocked down every wall. John Bon Jovi started off as a sweeper in at one of the record labels. Nobody wanted him, kept throwing it in their face, throwing it in their face, throwing it in their face. You knock the door down, you keep going. That's all it is, tenacity. Look, I didn't go to film school, and film school when I was young I think is different to film school now. And film school in America is vastly different to film school here. So they actually teach you how to make movies over there. A lot of the film schools here, they might teach you the basic theoretical outlines, but I don't think you'll ever beat your own desires to go and do it yourself and learn from falling over and practice. And I mean, there's no limit now. When I started, we were shooting on film. So you had to be really wary of every second that you shot because it was costing you money. We had to go and process the thing. To cut it, we actually had to cut film and stick it together and hold it up. There's no excuses now. Digital has just changed the whole game across the board. You can do anything at any level. You can go out and shoot a film in a day. There's nothing that's holding you back. So, yeah, it's just a matter of getting off your butt and going and doing it. I don't know that film school is going to make a huge difference. I don't think that you're not guaranteed anything if you walk out of film school. I mean, even with acting, you think of actors, our most famous acting school is NIDA. But I don't know about you, I can count the amount of actors that I know that have gone out of NIDA to be hugely successful on one hand. And there's students that go through there every year. I think everything comes down to the individual. I'm not saying that any of these institutions are bad by any means. You know, some people need those to go through the process and learn. But I think that, you know, it's going to come down to your own intelligence and desire to get it and how to go after it. I think film festivals are great, particularly with films that don't sit within those standard boxes that I was saying earlier. And also for networking, you know, you can get out there and you can meet some amazing people there, you know, other artists, distributors, financiers, all sorts of things. So yeah, I think the festival circuit's fantastic, and it's also probably more encouraging than any other avenue on a professional level. I'm not talking the internet again, but on a professional recognised level that can actually give you guys a shot, you know, at a wider market. And also to validate it. You know, half of the journey of filmmaking is validation. You know, if you and I went and shot, you know, a kid riding down the street on a bike and we thought it was fantastic and it went into festivals and it didn't do anything, but then if, you know, Quentin Tarantino saw it tomorrow and thought it was the best thing in the world, instant validation that the whole world would go, oh, I've got to go and see this show about the kid riding down the street because it's amazing, because Tarantino said it's amazing. So same with festivals, you know, as soon as you get that stamp of validation on it, all of a sudden it adds weight and legitimacy to what you do. The tips that I would give anybody else making a feature, probably the most basic thing that I would say is that just do it. I know that sounds convoluted and it sounds too vague, but again, you know, you don't need money to make a film anymore. You can literally film a film on an iPhone. You've just got to make it happen, will it into being. I think that's the biggest thing with a lot of people is I meet so many people with a lot of talent, you know, that never get anywhere, and it's because they're complacent, you know, or life gets in the way or whatever it be. No, you've just got to say, right, I'm going to do it, I'm going to make it happen, and by hook or by crook, you make it happen. I mean, how many amazing films have gone on to be hugely successful that have been done for shoestrings? Paranormal Activity was done for $15,000. It's not that hard to get $15,000 together for most people these days. My first film was $49,000 and it was all donated by family and friends. You just pick up the phone and say, hey, you know how much I've loved to do film? Well, guess what? I'm going to take that chance. I'm going to give it that risk. And, you know, somebody might give you $20, the next person might give you $1,000, and they'll say, you know what? Good on you. Here you go and give it a dash. I'll get behind your dream. Why not? Make it happen. That's the key.